И снова здравствуйте, дорогие друзья.
Hi again.
Свой выбор на нашей следующей
This is Colonized, building the cities of the future today.
сессии организована при
The session has been organized with the help of WebRF and Web Ventures.
вооружения.
You're here, and that means that you made a very good choice, according to the UN. Currently, the cities
Земли.
are inhabited by more than half of the global population.
8%.
That will be going up to the level of 68% very soon. It's incredibly hard and important to create good environment for people living in cities.
Внедрение умных технологий.
And new technologies can help out
К развитию
with that. Different countries have different approaches to how to improve cities' infrastructure. In Asia,
Индонезия реализует 20
sometimes
включая строительство
city authorities or
острова Борнео.
country authorities just build new cities. In Indonesia, a new city was built in Borneo. Putrajaya, a new administrative
Создает полигоны для
capital was created from scratch. So as you can see, some build new cities, some renovate old cities like Sejong
в Сундо был признан
and Songdo.
неуспешным.
Songdo was not a good example, but Sejong is expected to be a whole new ball game. Now, there are more and more labs which operate with new technologies. Clearly, new technologies require new people to operate them. You need new infrastructure, you need new culture of city planning.
Строим города.
Today,
Сегодня вместе с
we'll discuss how to build the cities of the future. We'll learn more about foreign cases, we'll share our own experience, we'll discuss how to build better cities, future cities.
Я с радостью приглашаю на сцену
And it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage our moderator, Vice President Habitatum, Ekaterina Letonovskaya. Welcome, Ekaterina. And today we will have a number of speakers. Edwin Dinder, Chief Digital Transformation Officer at Huawei. Maria Zima, R&D Manager for Smart Cities and Solutions, ABB. Leslie Nudabu, Co-founder, Chief Product Officer at Humanizing Autonomy. Katerina, over to you now. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'll be glad to take up your questions later on. Now, Maria, Leslie, Edwin, hi to you. Pleasure to see you. My name is Ekaterina. I work at Habitatum. We work at the cross-section of smart city planning and IT solutions, and that's exactly what we are discussing today. This is a huge field, huge topic to discuss. It's hard to ignore new technologies when building new cities or improving the existing ones. Technologies underpin everything. Our way of life is now tightly intertwined with technologies. A lot of experts say that our cities will be soon controlled with the help of a device. You click one button and it all works. But some say this is not going to be good for us. Well, today we'll discuss our future, the future of our cities, of our infrastructure. We'll discuss the behavior of today's and tomorrow's city dwellers. Before we start, I would like to give a couple of words on the format of our discussion. If you don't mind, I'd like to make it more lively, like a TED Talks, for instance. So, short intervention, questions and answers. We'll be discussing ideas, not talking about presentations, if you don't mind. I hope we will have enough time at the end to have a discussion with our audience, offline and online audience, because here I have a very special device with all the questions that we are getting from our online audience. Now, let's start the discussion. If you don't mind, I will switch to English, because all our speakers today speak English, so it will be more comfortable for them, I think.
Edwin, Leslie, I'm glad to see you here at this discussion. The first question that I have refers to the introduction. So what's the balance between the, technologies for the reaction of the changes in urban lifestyle and the technologies as the core of urban infrastructures and, the construction bricks of the city? So I'd like to address this question to Maria first, and appreciate the additional comments from Edwin and Leslie as well.
Happy afternoon from Zurich. It's really a pleasure to be here. So my name is Maria Zima, and I lead Smart Cities and Societies program with ABB. So let me address this question looking at it from the angle of the infrastructure. A Smart Society program is a good way of introducing larger purpose at ABB. What we want to achieve is to transform and create more sustainable society. This might be not as present in the attention of the citizens as the final user apps or similar functionalities, and yet, perhaps without noticing that, that has a magnificent impact on our city life. So we do that today is largely through digitalized engineering, connecting cloud-enabled software solutions to equipment, to manage energy in buildings, transportation, and the power grid itself, to create more energy-efficient robotics, motors, and to automate and optimize all sorts of the processes. So let us think what are cities and what are smart cities. It's first of all habitat for people and businesses. It's a set of buildings where we spend majority of our time connected by roads and other multimodal transportation means, supplied with power and water, connected digitally via communications, and supported with the data centers. So all of that infrastructure, everything we do requires energy, and our goal is to be able to do more with less energy to achieve also the sustainability targets and the well-being of the planet we live on. For now, maybe when we are on Mars, we should start thinking of how do we do that with Mars as well. So let me start with the transport for goods and people and fast charging infrastructure. It's huge. It's about 320 billions. It was recently announced that will be put on to support electrical transportation. And to ensure the same experience as we have currently with the fuel-based cars, we need to support it with the very fast charging infrastructure that is able to put on the vehicle back on the road just within a couple of minutes. So let us think what is behind this charging infrastructure. It's the connectivity of the chargers to provide remote monitoring and control platforms. It's asset management of this huge, very significant new infrastructure, and we have proven that a lot of the aspects can be addressed really via remote actions. A lot of the diagnostics can be run remotely. Besides, all the digital connectivity is offering the possibility to elaborate on the new business models to help the operators of the transportation infrastructure also to create new business revenues. Metro, rail, roads, tunnels, bridges, airports, all these parts, they might be even on its own the new districts of the city, or ports, be it sea or bigger river ports. It's magnificent infrastructure, but it also requires a lot of energy, and therefore it requires a lot of clever thinking and smart technology of how to be able to manage it. So how this technology contributes also to our better, safer, smarter building environment. Buildings are our homes, our offices. These are places where we live and work. We spend most of our time, and our goal is to make them ideal habitats for people, at the same time to make them enhancements and not the drains of the planet. We can solve this through digitalization, creating healthier, more comfortable environment. We use smart automation motors to create clean airflow, adjusting temperature, oxygen levels within the building according to the user preference, which have been learned through the AI technologies. detected by sensors, and then also apply predictive analytics and whatever capability is available via the cloud technologies. Motors, power, air conditioning, all these operate and need efficient interconnected systems. And we can do it for the entire building, or we can do it even for the fleets of the buildings. And by doing so, we can live and work safely and comfortably, and to do all of that in the harmony with requirements of the planet and its needs. The next point is aesthetics and convenience, the user experience that don't only ensure high quality of the environment, but also seamless integration with the building itself, building controls that support our ambition in more sustainable environment and reduction of the energy use. Again, AI, machine learning, IoT to automate, monitor, optimize every aspect of comfort, safety, communications, and the power usage in the building is contributing enormously to overall efficiency and overall comfort and well-being within the environment of the building. Let's switch to water. It's just a basic need, but it's becoming increasingly scarce resource in many places around the planet, and posing a special challenge to water supply, especially in scarce city networks that are pressurized and pushed beyond their capacity. So qualitative motors and also the automation that is monitoring the performance of the infrastructure, detecting water leakage and helping to identify and optimize it. This is essential and crucial to the performance of that infrastructure. Let's look at the power grids. With the digital automated tools, we can control what time of the day we draw the energy from the grid, and we can adjust it to the availability of the wind or solar energy. That is, of course, less controllable and predictable than the resources we are relying on today, largely. So, in all of these projects, the digital layer is inseparable, inevitable part that helps us to achieve better productivity, better efficiencies throughout the whole life cycle. And typically we see that 5 to 10% of the costs of the project, that is infrastructure project, would be allocated to part of the automation and digitalization. And I believe personally it has to go hand in hand, really ensuring that the life cycle performance of that infrastructure is at its optimum, at its best capabilities being explored. One aspect what I want to mention also, and that might be interesting particularly to this creative audience, is the strategy of the open APIs. So many innovative, disruptive ideas might be coming from the open innovation ecosystem that is largely being explored nowadays. So we also took a strategy to go with the open ecosystem. So the standardized and well-documented APIs would allow to our partners, to startups, to small enterprises, academia, to create a prototype of the analytics that can be placed in the cloud and run by the customer that have chosen to apply these analytics on its own. So it's retrofit or greenfield. It's a very powerful tool nowadays to achieve more productivity, and I think major aspect is to bring more benefits to the customer. So let's explore what is the best for the citizen, for the customers together.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks a lot. So based on what you just described, the efficiency and the better capacities of urban infrastructure is one of the angles of what you're introducing with ABB, but there is also potentially the complete change of urban behaviors based on the innovations that you bring for transport and mobility, for the behavior related to energy consumption and things like that. And so that leads well to the next question that I wanted to ask. That is, how does the change of the citizens' behavior based on the influence of digital technologies and the rest, overall the changes of human behavior influences the way we plan for these infrastructures and design our cities overall? And here I'd like to ask the main question, Leslie, based on your experience with human behavior analytics and artificial intelligence, could you tell us more about how this actually influences the design of our cities?
So I'm Leslie, I'm the Chief Product Officer and co-founder of Humanizing Autonomy. We built something called Behavior AI. And I was really pleased to hear Maria mention all the different aspects that ABB is involved in, because that's exactly where all this automation needs to interact with people. And what we really saw that was missing was that this automation had no idea what the people were doing, but people had to change their behavior to adapt to the automation. And we thought it would have to be the other way around. So we have the computer vision software that uses cameras to understand and predict human behavior so that the automated systems can adapt to what the people are doing around them. So the technology that is supplied in is, first of all, it was self-driving vehicles. Now it's also in human-driven vehicles, dash cams, factory robotics, logistics vehicles, roadside infrastructure cameras. All of those camera sensors are able to extract information of how people move throughout the city, within a factory, and how you can then provide a much better experience for those people. And I would like to add one to the list that you previously mentioned, Maria, but which was like the safety, the efficiency, the productivity, and that's quality of life. Because I feel that once you automate so many parts of the city, of an environment, you really need to care a lot about what impact that has on the people, and to make sure that they feel more free, more respected, and safer around these vehicles. And that's exactly what we're trying to achieve. So while you can extract interesting insights for preventing accidents, detecting risks, it's also about, do you have a natural interaction with your environment? Do you have a natural interaction with the vehicles that are driving around you when you cannot have eye contact with the driver anymore? How do you know that these vehicles understand you? How do you know that your behavior is respected and understood by these vehicles when you're driving with a baby pram across the street? That you're sure that that vehicle understands what you're going to do and that it should be more careful around you. So I think our goal is much more about making sure that people can behave as naturally as possible and feel as comfortable as possible in the city infrastructure. And you can already do that now. Even without advanced technology, just using camera sensors, you can learn a lot about how people move through a city, where they are intending to cross, when they are intending to cross, and adapt, for example, the stoplights. Or in the future, you might want to make the crosswalks wider when there's a larger group of people coming. Or you might want to make a road narrower when you know that there are fewer cars and more pedestrians have to use the street. Maybe you want to create a special drone landing zone at the time when there's a delivery next to a hospital and it cannot land anywhere else. And I think that's a really exciting part of this IT integration of the city, where you use both the physical infrastructure and the digital insights that you can generate to create a completely flexible and adaptable city that really truly serves the citizens and other road users within that city.
Thanks a lot, Leslie. The end of your speech reminds me of the quotation of Zygmunt Bauman about the fact that we really need more kind of readiness and adaptation in our cities than just planning. So we need to be ready to react instead of plan and control. So that makes perfect sense.
Exactly. Yeah. One of the previous talks with Mr. Lysenko, the Minister of IT from Moscow, was exactly about this as well. How you can build a city that's really adaptable. And I think that's what both Edwin will likely talk about as well as Maria. We can provide great insights that are truly flexible, really fast, and allow you as a city or a government or even a fleet provider or a technology provider in a city to adapt quickly to new behaviors that the citizens adapt. Because we all know that the world isn't a static, fixed thing. People change, people behave differently a year after the other, and if you make something that is fixed in time, then you'll know it will be outdated the day after you've deployed it.
Right, but the question there is then, if we put these investments into large infrastructural projects, how do we introduce this kind of flexibility and readiness to react there? I don't know if, Leslie, you have an answer to that, or any one of the speakers as well, but that's an open question to me, actually.
I do for sure, and I'm sure that my colleagues here will be able to join the conversation. And I feel that you shouldn't ship and forget. That was the past. That's where you develop the product, threw it out in the public, and then just let people figure out how to use it without knowing what was happening to that product, how the people were interacting with it, and not learning from your deployment. Basically, you can only learn from it again once you do customer insights, research groups, but the product isn't telling you anything new, and you can't update the product because you don't have any connectivity to it. So I think that's going to be essential, where when you invest in large infrastructure, in large mobility projects, that you can at least understand how it's being used, how people might be misusing it, how people might want to use it in the future, and being able to update that with just a simple software update, rather than having to send engineers there, adding new hardware to the mix. Obviously, you'll need to provide those updates as well, but I think you can be a lot smarter in doing that when you think more digitally, even about the physical experiences that people have in the city.
Right.
Absolutely, same here, I couldn't agree more. So it's not only about addressing immediate need and designing for forever, but it's of course thinking over the life cycle of the equipment, what I was mentioning also earlier, perhaps allowing the open APIs, open interfaces, so that the customer can develop their own tailored analytics that evolves together with the needs of the citizens potentially. Or it's also about ability to update the software of the digital infrastructure, something that perhaps we are used as a customers on the mobile phones or similar gadgets, but we see the same capability coming, but into the critical infrastructure that have to perform 24, 365, any moment, any time, and that is also the completely digital, completely different scale of the digital evolution, when you cannot allow any disruption at all whatsoever, as in transport and in energy infrastructure, you really aim to reduce it to absolute minimum, absolutely exceptional event. And I'm really happy that in the past years the technology is at our fingertips to be able to design these kind of solutions for the customers.
I think it goes even further than that, if I may. If you look at industries like healthcare, for example, any disrupt in any case, for example, power, has a huge and therefore negative impact on the healthcare outcome, on patient outcome. I think the importance doesn't sit with the availability of power, but with the continuity of power. And I think, Maria, as you mentioned before, I think ABB is exactly on the right track, and what Leslie mentioned earlier. I think what we're trying to say here is that technology should allow us to do better what we already do best. And my personal view, even though I represent a technology company, one of the largest in the world actually, is that if technology does not allow us to do better what we already do best, then it's interesting and nice to look at, but it should be in a museum of the future or something like that, because there's no use for technology if it doesn't do, and if it doesn't help us do better what we already do best.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. Appreciate your opinions. And Edwin, thanks for joining the discussion. I had a question related to the continuing what Leslie was talking about related to human AI. You, Edwin, have a definition of AI which is a little bit different from what we're used to. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and how that applies to the development of cities?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me. I'm really honored to be, in this case, virtually. I've been to these sessions earlier in person, and I so miss the area of Skolkovo, which is one of the smartest areas of Moscow. And Moscow is definitely one of the smartest cities in the world already. But having said that, I am Chief Digital Transformation Officer in Huawei Technologies, and I help our customers and our partners with their digital journey. And often, well, not even often, almost all the time in all my sessions that I have, with stakeholders on different levels and on different sides of the equation and organizations. It comes back to the component of AI, and everybody keeps talking about artificial, you know, artificial intelligence, and I honestly, truly believe, I don't think that there is anything artificial about intelligence. Also, if it's coming from computers or computing power or algorithms that are working together, or machine learning or deep learning, there is a lot of intellect in it, but nothing is artificial as far as I'm concerned. So when it comes to AI and the definition of AI, there's a couple of terms that I usually take on it. And the first one then, of course, is that it's by all means not artificial at all. One of our flagship events a few years ago, which is called Huawei Connect, in 2018 had the premise that said activate intelligence. And I think one of the meanings, one of the things that we can relate to the meaning of AI is to activate intelligence. For example, consider AI almost like the brain of a child. It is so full of potential, the brain of a child, and it's waiting for input. But it's not only waiting for input, it's also there to learn, it's there to follow curiosity and to live up on experiences and to pick oneself up and move on. So activate intelligence, I think, is a very good starting point to think of it as something that can be fused, something that can be sparked. And once it's activated, then probably it progresses in a certain way, or it moves forward in a certain way. For example, it advances, it progresses, it moves up higher up the value chain. So another way of looking at AI could be to advance intelligence once it has been activated. And there are so many examples of where AI is advancing already. Leslie, for example, mentioned a few, but Mariah, of course, also did. And another one could perhaps be that once it is activated and once it has advanced itself, then maybe we can add a few things to it, or we can augment it. We can create a virtual environment or a digital twin of something physical, a digital twin of a physical economy, or a digital twin of physical operations and processes of a city, for example, a digital twin or an intelligent twin of a city, where AI is activated, where AI has advanced, and where we're now able to fuse it further and augment it further with different services going forward. So AI as in augment intelligence. And maybe another example of looking at it would be to see if we can use it to unlock further potential of different industries. Maria mentioned a few, Leslie also mentioned a few, when I tapped in with my comment earlier relating to healthcare and so on and so forth. But any industry is helped once we're able to apply everything that we've learned and everything that we've been able to embrace and got our head around for when it comes to intelligence. So from an AI component, applied intelligence, maybe even with research and think tanks and what have you. And last but not least, and this is a bonus AI because the previous ones were 5, it's the 5 A's of AI, if you like, which is not a new concept. I just tapped into it and gave it 3 new definitions. But another one would perhaps be to autonomize. So autonomous intelligence, intelligence that works for itself, that understands of itself what it can do, what the power of it is, how it works and how it progresses, and how it maybe can advise going forward, and it's waiting for an approval or an authentication or an authorization. So coming back to your initial question, where will AI perhaps add to, for example, urban development or policies and solutions? I think these different meanings that I just gave, or these different angles or these different turns that I took when it comes to AI, I think we can apply these A's, or we can bring these A's into activate urban development, activate policies, activate solutions. We can advance urban development, advance policies, and advance solutions. We can augment urban development, we can augment policies and augment solutions. We can even apply urban development, apply policies and apply solutions, and maybe even in an autonomous way, urban development applies itself. Creates policies that we just need to look at and approve rather than rewrite them or co-write them or reinvent them, and the same goes for solutions. This is a bit of my turn when it comes to AI and defining it and relating to your question where you ask me how it will influence urban development and policies and solutions.
Thanks, Edwin. The question that I have in these regards is that based on the sequential growth of AI from activate to advanced and to autonomous, where should it be applied in the city? Whether it should be initially applied on a citywide scale and in full-scale practice, or it needs to be tested first in some test beds, in some laboratories, in some neighborhoods, and then be scaled up to the whole city. So in your stages of AI augmentation and development, where does it sit in the city?
It sits everywhere. And if it's not needed, it sits nowhere. That's basically my key point. If, as I said before, if technology doesn't allow us or doesn't help us do better what we already do best, then just don't use it. Put it in the museum of the future. That would be my take for it. So if there is an activate intelligent component or an augmented intelligent component or an autonomous intelligent component, that's just not useful, that doesn't work, or that doesn't scale, then as nice as it is, but for this particular program and for this particular initiative, that as a group of people or as a consortium or as a public-private partnership or as the management of a city or the mayor of a city and his councillors are looking at, if it's not able to do what it's supposed to do, or if it's not able to allow us to do better what we already do best, then by all means don't use it. Don't apply it, don't automate it, don't put it in place. Put it in the museum of the future. Another angle perhaps to take on this is the following. We all have computers. Maybe not you guys over there in the audience there as you're sitting, but maybe at home, because maybe you're just like I am online and you're using a computer or you're using a smartphone. I am sure this is not your first computer. I'm also sure that this is not your first smartphone. You've had 3 or 4 before this one. You had 3 or 4 computers before this one. I'm also sure that you agree with me that most computers that you have in your hand today look more or less the same than the one you had before, and the one you had before looks more or less the same than the one you had before that. So you could debate. There's not much change, going on with these computers, right? It's a screen, it has a keyboard, you can type on it. But I'm also sure you agree with me that the computer that you have today is tremendously different from the one that you had 2 or 3 or 4 years ago or 6 years ago, even though it looks the same. The capacity from within, the capability from within, and the opportunities that it helps you unlock today versus the one 2 years ago or 3 years ago or the one prior to this one is so significantly different. And I think it also applies to the question that you've just asked me. Where and how does AI come in? It's already there and it sits everywhere and it helps us. And if it doesn't help us, it doesn't. We use it, we embrace it, we bring it further to the next level. It helps us to move higher up the value chain into the next level. And again, as I said before, if we're applying it, so we are embracing it, we're choosing it, we're selecting it, and we're trying to put it in place, after a moment of time, test drive or proof of value, if the proof of value doesn't come out, then by all means, turn it off. Put it in a museum of the future and go for the next one.
Thank you. That makes sense. But could you probably illustrate that by any example, like the example of, any transport-related artificial intelligence or construction-related or anything related to the development of the city? How does this evolve from activate AI to, autonomous AI? And how is that applied actually by the example?
I can give you a clear example of the city that I live in, which is Shenzhen. They have a zoo. And there's different ways of getting your tickets, your entrance tickets to go to this zoo. You can buy tickets online. You can buy tickets at a ticket office or a box office. And then there needs to be some sort of authentication and authorization. Certain areas of the zoo are for persons who are not below a certain height, or who are above a certain age, because certain areas are, for adults or at least people who are not babies and all that, right? So there's different ways of check that. Usually what you do is you take your ID and you identify yourself, and you can go into certain areas or not. The government at one point said, not the government, the owners of this zoo said, we're going to do something else. We're going to move everything from authentication to face recognition. So they applied everything, meaning all the previous ways of identification were out of the window, not being used. The citizens of the city, the people of Shenzhen, stood up went to court actually and said to the owners of the zoo, saying, you know, this is not a right way of dealing with us as your customers. This is not a right way of giving us the benefit and a good user experience, because I don't think face recognition is going to do anything else than what it already has done. And to make a long story short, this is an example where AI has been put in place because AI is very accurate when it comes to certain activities. For example, recognizing faces from your ID versus you standing in front of such a camera. Or in your subscription, when you have subscribed 10 years ago or 11 years ago, you uploaded or you provided a copy of your ID card. That matching, you know, is very automated. But here, it's circled back. They got rid of all the face recognition parts and had to move back into where they came from. The regular way and the straightforward way was just as fast as it was needed to authenticate people and to make sure that no youngsters were going into certain areas of, for example, the safari area of the zoo, where you had to be of a certain height and of a certain age, otherwise you couldn't go in. You know, all these experiences. So here's a clear example where AI works. AI works just fine. It helps you in payments and identification for mobile payments and in shopping malls and what have you. But for this particular zoo, it was circled back and the technology was taken out by request of the people.
Thank you.
Or demand actually. It was demanded by the people and it was circled back under government order.
Mm-hmm. Marie, Leslie, do you have anything to add here?
Oh, sure, would be my pleasure. So I'd like to reinforce the points Edwin was making earlier. I mean, if you look at the energy industry, digitalization or automation have started probably as early as the electricity itself, just because of the requirements of the speed that the processes that are happening in electrical facilities, grids, devices are requiring. So it's not something that human can take part of. And we do forget that the automation and digitalization have started decades, if not centuries ago. So we have put the first microprocessor-based relay in the operation in 1982. What have changed in the past years, and again, as Edwin mentioned, it's the capability to handle these processes, but also the cost. So that's the point I would like to bring in for the consideration. So we are able to do much more, many more applications make sense because they are economically viable for the customers, for the end citizens. And if I think of the examples that are most customer-oriented, then this is image recognition for example, buildings, or energy management, adjustment of the settings of the climate control, let's say, within the building, or adjusting the settings that are more comfortable for the performance, for also for the equipment. So also the part of the monitoring diagnostic that is providing in turn again a huge savings potential. That all being enabled by the digital connectivity, by cloud, by much cheaper sensors than they used to be in the previous days. So the capabilities and potential is enormous, and it can be explored almost in every area. And it's the role of engineering, I believe, that is choosing the right technology with the right application, and just bringing the most benefit to the end user and customer.
Thank you. So I believe that wraps up the discussion pretty well. So we're all looking into, you know, having more flexibility in the way we develop cities, thanks to the technologies, having more ways to use the insights that we know from the usage of these technologies to adapt to the usage of these technologies, and even if needed, you know, get back to square one and start it again in case this does not bring the actual benefit to the community. So I think that's a good part for a good stage for us to pass to any questions that the audience might have. So I have a tool here for having online questions, but I believe there's nothing here yet. So maybe anyone from the offline audience wants to ask something, just leaving the floor. Yes, there's a gentleman who wants to ask a question.
Thank you very much. My name is Victor, and I'd like to ask our dear guests about how they think about just a few remarks about our activity. We are developing yacht marinas, ocean marinas in Indian Ocean, and the fact that we are interested in see these yacht marinas as smart places, but we have a lot of I don't know how to say the variables. I mean, wind, ocean, waves, and so on. So, have you? Could you recommend us something, maybe some sort of application, or maybe some cases that you have in your vision that we could use for our project? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
We have a few, if I may, and it's very short. I don't want to push away the answer too far, but if you would go to the internet and if you would search for Huawei Tech for All and Huawei Tech for Good, you will find examples of where we are working on oceanography, oceanary, trying to see if we can preserve wildlife, and there's technology in there that I think can be bridged to the project that you're referring to.
Thanks,
I
Edwin.
would like to invite to explore or get in touch as well to understand what are the potentials, what are the application of technologies, and even more specifically, you know, how we can advance the requirements of sustainability, let's say, to the applications related to marine and ports. We had a very interesting example, for example, of fishery and how one can apply artificial intelligence to make better use of the resources and also to have a much more sustainable footprint in fish production. So I'm very happy to discuss, to get in touch, to explore all the capabilities related to the applications in water environment.
By the way, if I may, I have put the link in the chat box of this Zoom session. I'm not sure if the audience can see that or if there's a way for them to get it, but I put the link that I just referred to in the chat box of this session.
Yeah, maybe someone could show that, the chat box, I mean, in Zoom here on the screen, so that the link can be copied. Thanks a lot, Maria, Edwin. Thanks a lot, Leslie. I believe we're running out of time, so I appreciate your feedback, your opinions, your expertise. I hope we'll meet again here in a couple of years from now and have even, you know, more exciting discussions of the way all that we discussed applied already in the cities. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, the audience. Have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.